While mammoths were busy adapting to environments that barely tolerated their presence, the Elasmotherium had claimed territories that actively welcomed their dominance. The key difference wasn't just what they could survive, it was what they could control. The Eurasian steppe during the Pleistocene was a landscape that seemed designed specifically for creatures like the Elasmotherium. Vast open grasslands stretched for thousands of miles. Elasmotherium was a living battering ram, perfectly built for the occasional river valleys and scattered patches of woodland that defined its world. For this creature, there were no dense forests to navigate, no steep terrains to negotiate, just endless expanses of territory where speed, power, and intimidation ruled supreme. But what always strikes me is that they weren't just surviving in these conditions. They were thriving in areas where other megafauna couldn't even establish permanent populations. The frozen steppes of Siberia, the windswept plains of Kazakhstan, the harsh grasslands of Central Asia. These were Elasmotherium's hunting grounds, territories where the combination of extreme cold, sparse vegetation, and brutal competition eliminated most other large herbivores. I think the secret lay in their approach to resource management. While mammoth herds required vast areas to support their numbers, moving constantly to find sufficient food, Elasmotherium operated on a different principle entirely. They were territorial specialists, claiming specific ranges and defending them with the kind of aggressive efficiency that made migration unnecessary. That horn wasn't just a weapon, it was a property deed, written in bone and enforced through violence. Consider the advantages this gave them during the harshest periods of the Ice Age. When food became scarce and competition intensified, mammoth herds had to keep moving, constantly searching for new feeding grounds while burning precious calories in the process. Elasmotherium simply cleared their territory of competitors and settled in for the long haul. They could access buried vegetation that other creatures couldn't reach, defend prime feeding areas that others couldn't claim, and maintain energy reserves that migration-dependent species couldn't match. The fossil record tells a story of creatures that weren't just surviving, they were prospering. Elasmotherium remains have been found across a range that stretched from Ukraine to Mongolia, a distribution that suggests not desperate wandering, but successful territorial expansion. These weren't refugees from climate change. They were the landlords of the Ice Age, collecting rent in the form of exclusive access to the best grazing areas. And unlike mammoth populations, which fluctuated dramatically with environmental changes, Elasmotherium populations remained relatively stable throughout their existence. This wasn't luck. It was the natural result of a survival strategy so effective that it made them nearly immune to the environmental press that devastated other megafauna. For a creature so perfectly adapted to Ice Age conditions, so dominant in its chosen environment, and so well equipped for survival, Elasmotherium's extinction presents one of paleontology's most perplexing mysteries. How do you eliminate something that appeared virtually indestructible? While mammoths managed to survive in various forms until roughly 4,000 years ago, with some populations persistent on isolated islands well into human civilization, Elasmotherium vanished from the fossil record around 39,000 years ago. This wasn't a gradual decline. It was a sudden, complete disappearance that left no descendants and precious few clues about what could have overwhelmed such a formidable creature. The conventional explanation points to climate change, but this theory has some serious problems. Elasmotherium had already survived multiple ice ages, numerous warming periods, and dramatic environmental shifts throughout its history. These were creatures that had proven themselves capable of adapting to changing conditions over millions of years. Why would this particular climate shift prove fatal when so many previous ones had been survived? Some researchers suggest human hunting prey, but again, the evidence doesn't quite add up. While humans were certainly present in Elasmotherium's range during the late Pleistocene, the idea that early human populations could have systematically eliminated creatures this large and dangerous seems optimistic at best. Remember, we're talking about 5-ton animals armed with 6-eft horns and the temperament of a cornered badger. Even with primitive weapons, the cost-benefit analysis of hunting such creatures seems questionable. The most disturbing possibility is that Elasmotherium's very dominance contributed to its downfall. Their territorial nature, while advantageous during stable periods, may have prevented them from adapting to rapidly changing conditions. Unlike mammoths, which could migrate to more favorable areas, Elasmotherium populations may have been too committed to their territories to abandon them when conditions deteriorated. But here's the truly unsettling part. The disappearance was so complete that for centuries, scientists weren't even Elasmotherium had existed at all. Unlike mammoth remains, which are found regularly and in excellent condition, Elasmotherium fossils are rare and often fragmentary. It's almost as if something deliberately erased them from the archaeological record. Recent discoveries have added new layers to this mystery. Some fossils show evidence of stress markers and nutritional deficiencies that suggest the final populations were struggling with environmental press. Others display unusual growth patterns that might indicate disease or genetic problems. The picture emerging is of a species that didn't just disappear. It collapsed suddenly and catastrophically. Taken together, the evidence paints a grim picture. Whatever eliminated Elasmotherium was powerful enough to bring down a creature that had reigned unchallenged for ages, resilient, dominant, and built to endure. And yet it vanished with barely a trace. For an animal that once defined the Ice Age landscape, the silence surrounding its extinction is genuinely haunting. The mammoth survival story, impressive as it is, suddenly seems less like triumph and more like luck. They weren't necessarily better adapted. Elasmotherium. It wasn't just another Ice Age animal. It was, in my view, the pinnacle of prehistoric power. A creature so finely tuned to its environment that it redefined what dominance truly looked like. The mammoth may have gotten all the fame, but Elasmotherium earned the title that mattered most, the real titan of the Ice Age. But Elasmotherium wasn't the only behemoth history forgot. While it ruled the frozen steppes, another titan far to the south was the definition of giant altogether. Bigger than a mammoth, heavier than a T-Rex, and possibly the largest land mammal to ever walk the earth. When I envision the world that shaped our earliest ancestors, I typically imagine a landscape dominated by predators. Saber-toothed cats stalking the savanna, massive hyenas lurking near waterholes, and early humans huddled around fires for protection. But what if one of the most significant competitors our ancestors faced wasn't a carnivore at all, but another primate? One so massive it would tower over any human alive today. Meet Dinopithecus ingens, the terrible ape of Pleistocene Africa. Standing over 1.5 meters, or around 5 feet tall when upright, and weighing up to 150 kilograms, or 330 pounds, it was nearly 5 times heavier than today's largest baboons. These colossal primates shared the African landscape with Australopithecus, an early Homo species, between roughly 3 to 2 million years ago. Yet, despite their imposing presence during this pivotal chapter of prehistory, they remain virtually unknown outside of specialized scientific circles. Dinopithecus belongs to the family Cercopithecidae, the Old World monkeys rather than the hominid family. Specifically, it's classified within the subfamily Papionini, alongside modern baboons, geladas, and mangabeys. Despite this taxonomic distance from humans, Dinopithecus represents one of the most remarkable examples of primate gigantism in the fossil record. The genus first entered scientific literature in 1938 when paleontologist Robert Broom described Dinopithecus ingens based on fossil remains from Sterkfontein near Pretoria, South Africa. The name itself tells a story. Dino, from the Greek for terrible or fearfully great. Pithecus, meaning ape or monkey. And ingens, meaning huge in Latin. A fitting title, I think, for a creature that pushed the boundaries of what we thought primates could become. Subsequent discoveries have primarily come from cave sites in South Africa, including Kromdraai and Cooper's Cave, locations famously associated with early hominin remains. Fossil evidence includes partial skulls, mandibles, and postcranial elements that allow paleontologists to reconstruct its appearance and lifestyle. Most fossils date between 3 and 2 million years ago, placing Dinopithecus firmly in the Pliocene epoch, alongside early Australopithecus and Homo species. Physically, Dinopithecus was a scaled-up baboon built for terrestrial power. Its skull alone meet up to 30 centimeters in males and featured an elongated muzzle, enlarged canines, and a prominent sagittal crest for anchoring massive jaw muscles, indicators of both feeding strength and male-male competition. The mandible was exceptionally robust, with a deep body adapted to handle powerful chewing forces far beyond what is seen in modern baboons. Dental analysis shows a heavy emphasis on grinding plant material. Large molars with thick enamel point to a diet that included fibrous vegetation, seeds, and tubers, foods that required prolonged mastication. These adaptations suggest Dinopithecus could exploit tough resources that smaller primates couldn't process efficiently, offering a survival edge in diverse or fluctuating environments. Still, for all that chewing power, it needed a body that could carry the weight literally. Though fossilized postcranial remains are fragmentary, they leave no doubt. This was a ground dweller built like a fortress. The bones are dense, the muscle attachments oversized, and the proportions suggest a primate that moved low and heavy. It wasn't agile, but it didn't need to be. It was stable, durable, a four-limbed tank that could traverse both woodland and savanna. Now, here's where the social structure gets fascinating. Sexual dimorphism in Dinopithecus was extreme, even more pronounced than in modern baboons. Males may have weighed up to twice as much as females, and bore significantly larger canines and cranial crests. This suggests intense male competition, likely involving physical confrontations and dominance displays, a social structure where size directly translated to reproductive success. Yet all this leaves Dinopithecus somewhere in the middle of its ecosystem. Its size positioned it as a mesopredator, both hunter and hunted. It likely fed on fruits, seeds, roots, and small animals while remaining vulnerable to apex predators like saber-toothed cats or large hyenas. Its bulk, strength, and potential for aggressive defense would have made it a formidable opponent, one that early hominins may have respected, avoided, or even competed with. Modern baboons are notoriously territorial, confrontational, and quick to violence when threatened, and Dinopithecus almost certainly took that to the extreme. With large, dominant males leading the charge, a threatened troop could have erupted into an explosion of noise, displays, and physical retaliation. Raised hackles, deafening vocalizations, and jaw-clapping would have been the first warning. But if that didn't work, those massive canines weren't just for show. A provoked Dinopithecus, especially a protective male, could have delivered devastating bites and powerful strikes, capable of injuring or killing mid-sized predators. Some paleontologists estimate Dinopithecus could have delivered bite forces comparable to those of big cats, perhaps reaching or even exceeding 2,000 pounds of crushing force. I can only imagine the sight of them, a defensive circle of 10 or 20 large primates bristling with muscle and rage. It would have been a serious deterrent to even large carnivores or, for that matter, early hominins. Dinopithecus wasn't a creature that backed down easily. It simply didn't need to. During the Pleistocene era, when Dinopithecus thrived, South Africa was undergoing significant climatic shifts. For a primate of its exceptional size, these changes brought both unique challenges and new opportunities. Forests were gradually giving way to more open woodlands and grasslands, a transition that favored adaptable ground-dwelling species. Fossil sites where Dinopithecus remains have been found suggest it inhabited a mosaic landscape of open savanna interspersed with woodlands and riverine forests, environments not unlike those preferred by modern baboons, though likely on a far more intimidating scale. These multi-male, multi-female groups were probably structured around rigid dominance hierarchies, with adult males asserting their rank through visual displays and, when necessary, brutal physical confrontations. With some males weighing up to 150 kilograms, these clashes were anything but subtle. Adult males likely positioned themselves on the outskirts of the troop, forming a living barrier against potential predators. At dawn, the group would descend from cliffs or tall trees, safe havens used to avoid nocturnal hunters. From there, the day began with movement and lots of eating. Feeding likely consumed much of the daylight hours. Adult males may have needed up to 7 kiloliters of plant matter daily. Grasses, seeds, fruits, bulbs, tubers, all requiring tremendous chewing power. And while plants formed the base of their diet, they weren't strictly herbivores. Like their modern relatives, Dinopithecus likely supplemented with animal protein, small vertebrates, insects, scavenged carcasses. But here's the twist. With their size and strength, they may have taken things further. Juvenile antelope or the young of larger prey animals weren't out of the question. And when it came to disputed carcasses, their bulk alone may have been enough to intimidate other predators into backing off. Much like modern papionins, Dinopithecus likely relied on a rich set of vocalizations, facial cues, body postures, and physical contact. With brains scaled to their size and complex social structures to manage, their interactions were probably just as nuanced, broadcasting everything from individual rank to predator warnings with a glance or a grunt. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Dinopithecus is its temporal and geographic overlap with early human species. Between approximately 3 and 2 million years ago, as Dinopithecus roamed the South African landscape, the hominin presence was undergoing a period of remarkable change. Species like Australopithecus were being joined by early Homo. Upright walking had become well established, brain sizes were growing, and the first stone tools were appearing. This was the crucible of humanity, and Dinopithecus was there to witness it. The fossil evidence places Dinopithecus in association with hominin remains at several critical sites. At Swartkrans and Cooper's Cave in South Africa's cradle of humankind, Dinopithecus fossils have been found in the same deposits as Australopithecus robustus and early Homo specimens. This wasn't just proximity across a landscape. These primates inhabited the same immediate environments, drank from the same water sources, sheltered in the same cave systems, and likely observed each other regularly. The size disparity alone would have created a power imbalance. Early hominins stood approximately 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall and weighed between 30 to 55 kilos. They would have been significantly outmatched by adult male Dinopithecus, which averaged around 80 kilos, with larger individuals reaching up to 150 kilos. Armed with formidable canines and superior upper body strength, even the smaller female Dinopithecus would have presented a physical threat. Competition for resources was inevitable. Both groups were omnivorous with overlapping dietary preferences, though with different specializations. Early hominins were developing adaptations for a more versatile diet, including meat obtained through scavenging and possibly hunting, while Dinopithecus likely specialized in efficiently processing large quantities of plant materials. Nevertheless, both would have sought out the same high-value food resources, fruits, nuts, tubers, and water sources, creating potential conflict points. And it wasn't just diet that brought them into contact. Both groups favored mosaic environments, offering a mix of woodlands for shelter and open areas for foraging. Both likely needed trees or cliff faces for nighttime safety from predators. Both would have been drawn to reliable water sources, particularly during dry seasons. This shared preference for similar habitats would have end regular encounters between the species. The responses of early hominins to Dinopithecus were likely complex and situational. Direct competition was probably avoided when possible, with hominins developing greater behavioral flexibility to compensate for their physical disadvantage. This might have included adjusting activity patterns to avoid peak Dinopithecus feeding times, developing more efficient foraging strategies, or utilizing tools to access food resources unavailable to even the powerful Dinopithecus. One intriguing possibility is that the presence of Dinopithecus may have accelerated hominin tool use and cooperation. When confronted with larger, more physically imposing competitors, our ancestors The extinction of Dinopithecus is a story that haunts me. I imagine those last troops struggling as the grasslands expanded and the woodlands shrank, their food sources dwindling, their shelter disappearing. It makes you wonder how much prez our early ancestors were under, sharing a landscape with these mega-monkeys. Did the ability to crack open nuts with stone tools, to dig for tubers with sharpened sticks, or to coordinate group defense truly give them a critical edge? Then there were the predators. Dinopithecus and early hominins faced threats from the same array of fearsome carnivores, big cats, hyenas, crocodiles. Perhaps the presence of a Dinopithecus troop offered some protection to nearby hominins, predators less likely to attack when faced with multiple large aggressive males. Or perhaps a small hominin group attracted predators, inadvertently drawing danger to the Dinopithecus. Dinopithecus vanished around 1.8 to 1.6 million years ago. Climate change likely played a significant role in its decline, disrupting food availability and shelter as environments shifted. Competition from smaller, more adaptable baboons may have further hastened their end, especially as those shifting environments began to favor generalists. The rise of Homo erectus added new challenges. Their advanced tool use, broader diets, and overlapping ecological needs likely intensified the competition for resources. Predation dynamics may have shifted as well. Emerging carnivores increased the risks, particularly for the young. And while it's harder to confirm, disease, too, could have contributed. Socially cohesive species are often vulnerable to outbreaks. The very traits that once made Dinopithecus successful, large size, slow reproduction, and dietary specialization, may have ultimately left them exposed. Their extinction echoes the broader trend of large-bodied species disappearing during the Pleistocene epoch, not in a sudden collapse, but through a gradual decline under mounting press. And then there's the dire wolf. In ancient Greece, it was known as Inoxian dirus, the terrible wolf. It was said this creature was so dominant and ferocious that even the largest prehistoric animals feared it. With jaws that could tear through flesh and bones as massive as a mammoth's, it struck fear into the hearts of all who crossed its path. Dire wolves, the apex predators of their time, were renowned for their meat-centric diet and intimidating hunting skills. Their unique dental features, like distinct posterior cuspids and transverse crests, set them apart from other wolf species. Their digestive systems were tailored for processing meat, with short intestines optimized for their carnivorous diet. Their robust skeletons, powerful limbs, and broad chests hinted at their strength and prowess in hunting. Their incredible bite force, among the strongest of any canid, enabled them to take down formidable prey with remarkable efficiency. They prowled across diverse landscapes, from the plains of North America to the arid savannas of South America and the steppes of Eastern Asia. In North America, they hunted bison antiquus, Pleistocene horses like Equus scotti, and large ground sloths such as Megalonyx. Transitioning to South America, dire wolves feasted on a variety of prey, including large ground sloths, glyptodons, toxodons, mastodons, and extinct camelids, like Hemiocenia. Crossing the eastern Asian steppes, they faced formidable opponents like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, steppe bison, and wild horses. amidst fierce competition with other predators like Xenocion, Smilodon, the American lion, and the giant short-faced bear. Dire wolves fought fiercely for dominance in the food chain. At La Brea, they clashed with predators and scavengers amidst trapped herbivores, showcasing their dominance by outnumbering gray wolves 5-1 and demonstrating resilience in challenging environments. Living in monogamous pairs and hunting in packs, dire wolves displayed fierce determination and adaptability. Their hunting strategies, tooth breakage rates, and pack dynamics revealed insights into their evolutionary prowess and survival instincts. With their impressive ability to hunt a wide range of prey, their adaptability, their ferocity, and their versatility in diverse environments, the dire wolf truly stood as the ultimate ruler of the food chain. The origin of the dire wolf has sparked debate among scientists, with two conflicting theories proposed. The first, supported by fossil morphology, suggests an expansion of the genus Canis from Eurasia, gave rise to the dire wolf. The second theory suggests the dire wolf emerged from an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. Recent advancements in genetic analysis have shed new light on the origins of the dire wolf. In 1992, scientists embarked on a mission to extract mitochondrial DNA from the skeletal remains of Anoxion dirus gilda, a close relative of modern wolves. However, their efforts were thwarted when tar residue from the La Brea pits stubbornly clung to the bone material, preventing genetic analysis. Then, in 2021, scientists finally obtained nuclear DNA from 5 dire wolf fossils spanning thousands of years. The groundbreaking discoveries revealed the ancient heritage of this magnificent creature. It turns out that dire wolves represent a unique genetic lineage that split from wolf-like canines a staggering 5.7 million years ago. This supports the theory of an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. Comparing dire wolves and gray wolves, despite the similarity in their skeletal structures, they are not closely related. This is attributed to convergent evolution, wherein different species develop similar traits independently, akin to nature's playful mimicry game in the animal kingdom. Dire wolves stand out as a unique species within the canine world, distinct from modern gray wolves. Dire wolf fossils have been found in habitats as diverse as plains and forested mountain areas. And the story of these creatures spans an impressive 40 million years. I find it fascinating that their remains have been discovered across both North and South America. The most fossil-abundant areas are the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles and the Tula Springs in Nevada. While dire wolf remains are less common at high latitudes in North America, recent discoveries of Asian dire wolf fossils actually challenge previous theories about their range restrictions. Fossils have been reported in various states in the United States, with major sites located east of the Rocky Mountains. Dire wolf fossils have also been uncovered in various locations across Mexico, particularly in the San Jose Cave and El Cedazo, and they've been found in South America, with specimens dated to less than 17,000 years ago in countries including Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Ecuador. The discovery of a dire wolf fossil in northeastern China in 2020 suggests a migration route from mid-latitude North America across Beringia into Eurasia, challenging previous assumptions about barriers to their dispersal. understanding the physical characteristics of dire wolves sheds light on their remarkable adaptations and behaviors. The dire wolf, similar in proportions to modern North American wolves, like the Yukon wolf and northwestern wolf, exhibited variations in size and morphology. While some dire wolf specimens from Rancho La Brea were smaller than the largest northern wolves today, others were larger. The dire wolf had smaller feet and a larger head compared to modern wolves of similar body size, with a massive skull characterized by broader dimensions and a higher sagittal crest. Geographic differences in dire wolves were observed, with specimens from California and Mexico showing distinct craniodental features and limb proportions compared to those from east of the Continental Divide, while Canis dirus garanaticus possessed shorter and lighter limbs, making it less adapted for running than timber wolves and coyotes. Canis dirus possessed longer limbs, comparable to the Yukon wolf. 125,000 years ago, dire wolves roamed the earth when the sea level was 8 meters higher than today in the Sangamonian interglacial period. The Wisconsin glacial period followed, lasting from 80,000 to 20,000 years ago, also known as the Ice Age, with glaciers covering much of North America. Dire wolves went extinct 9,500 years ago, marking the end of a unique era. Research indicates that dire wolves evolved separately from modern North American gray wolves and coyotes without genetic mixing. The reasons for their extinction remain debated, likely involving factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability. The disappearance of dire wolves marked the end of a unique lineage within the Canidae family and potentially altered predator-prey dynamics at the time. Between 125,000 years ago and 9,500 years ago, significant climatic shifts occurred, shaping the environment in which dire wolves lived. These changes, alongside fluctuations in prey populations, likely influenced the dire wolves' survival. Dire wolves existed in diverse habitats ranging from grasslands to forests, adapting to various environmental conditions. As apex predators, they played a crucial role in regulating ecosystems, impacting the populations of herbivores and smaller predators. Their extinction represented a loss of biodiversity and disrupted ecological balances established over millennia. While interbreeding is known among wolf-like canines, studies have found no evidence of genetic mixing between dire wolves and extant North American gray wolves or coyotes, suggesting independent evolution. The exact reasons for dire wolf extinction remain a subject of debate, with factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability likely playing a role. Reflecting on the era of the dire wolf, its formidable presence and powerful bite force captivate our imagination. In the grand tapestry of Earth's history, few chapters are as captivating as the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. These magnificent creatures dominated our planet for over 160 million years, shaping ecosystems and adapting into a myriad of forms that continue to captivate our imagination. But as the curtain fell on the age of reptiles, it gave way to an unexpected sequel, one where the supporting character stepped into the spotlight and nearly stole the show. Enter the forest racids, more commonly known as the terror birds. These feathered nightmares emerged from the ashes of the dinosaur extinction, carrying the torch of their terrifying predecessors and proving that nature abhors a vacuum, especially when it comes to apex predators. Roughly 53 million years ago, in the early Eocene, the world was a very different place, a hothouse Earth with lush forests stretching from pole to pole, filled with a diverse range of life forms that emerged after the extinction of the dinosaurs. It was in this steamy prehistoric paradise that the first terror bird, Paleopsilopterus, made its debut. Standing at a modest height of 1 meter or 3 feet, this Brazilian bird might not have seemed particularly terrifying at first glance. In fact, it was about the same size as a modern-day stork. Hardly the stuff of nightmares, but appearances can be deceiving, and Paleopsilopterus had something its contemporaries lacked: potential. What set Paleopsilopterus apart was its agility and speed, traits that would become hallmarks of its descendants. While it may not have been the apex predator of its time, dwarfed by monstrous crocodilians and giant snakes, it was a harbinger of things to come. Little did the other inhabitants of ancient South America know what was in store. Imagine the surprise of early European mammals when a South American terror bird showed up. It's true, while most of its kin stayed in the Americas, one species, Eleutherornis, spread its wings across the sea to Europe. Fossil remains have been found in France and Switzerland. It must have been quite a shock. As the epochs rolled by, the terror birds just kept growing, adapting, diversifying. It was like they were in a competition with themselves, each new species trying to outdo its predecessors. The Oligocene epoch, from about 34 to 23 million years ago, marked a turning point. That's when the family really began to live up to its name, with the emergence of giants that would have given pause to even the bravest prey. Take Paraphosaurus, a Brazilian bird, an absolute behemoth that stood 4.5 feet tall and weighed a whopping 400 pounds. To put that in perspective, it outweighed the largest living bird today, the ostrich. This was no lightweight. Paraphosaurus was built like a feathered tank, with robust bones that spoke of raw power. Paleontologists believe it hunted with kicks, slashes, and powerful jabs with its sharp beak. It's a hunting style that might remind you of a prehistoric version of mixed martial arts. Paraphosaurus wasn't just a mindless brute either. Like many of its terror bird kin, it likely possessed a level of intelligence that set it apart from other contemporary predators. Studies of terror bird brain cases suggest they had well-developed visual and auditory centers, indicating keen senses. But as impressive as Paraphosaurus was, it was merely setting the stage for what was to come. As we step into the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, from about 23 to 2.5 million years ago, we encounter the true giants of the terror bird family. These were creatures that pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be a bird, reaching sizes that rivaled the predatory dinosaurs of old. 3 names stand out: Titanus, Kelenken, and Brontornis. Each represents the pinnacle of the terror bird lineage, and each had its own claim to fame. Titanus, the youngest and smallest of the trio, was also the most adventurous. While most terror birds were content to dominate South America, Titanus crossed the newly formed land bridge connecting North and South America, becoming the only large South American predator to successfully establish itself in North America. Unlike most of its relatives, this bird lived in what is now the United States, including Texas, Florida, and California. Standing over 6.5 feet tall, Titanus would have been an imposing sight. Imagine the shock of a Pleistocene horse or ground sloth suddenly confronted by this alien predator, half bird, half nightmare. But as impressive as Titanus was, it was dwarfed by its cousins back in South America. Kelenken, named after a mythological Tehuelche spirit, stood nearly 10 feet tall and weighed around 550 pounds. This was a bird the size of a grizzly bear, with a head larger than that of a horse and a beak that could crush bone. Recent studies have shown that Kelenken and other large terror birds possessed a unique skull structure that gave them increased bite force and pecking power. This suggests that these giants may have been capable of taking down larger prey than previously thought, potentially including some of the megafauna that roamed South America during their reign. The title of the largest terror bird is still hotly debated, with Brontornis giving Kelenken a run for its money. While slightly shorter, at just over 9 feet, Brontornis was built like a feathered bulldozer, potentially weighing up to 880 pounds. This made it not just the heaviest terror bird, but also the heaviest carnivorous bird of all time and the 4th heaviest bird overall. Interestingly, Brontornis has been the subject of scientific controversy. Some paleontologists have questioned whether it was truly a terror bird or even a carnivore at all, citing similarities in its toe claws to those of herbivorous birds. However, recent studies have identified features in Brontornis's vertebrae that are unique to terror birds, lending weight to its classification as a member of this fearsome family. Whether Brontornis was a terror bird or not, its massive size would have made it a force to be reckoned with. Its weight likely made it slower than its more nimble cousins, but what it lacked in speed, it made up for in raw power. I imagine Brontornis as the tank of the terror bird world. I've always been captivated by the idea of a bird that could instill terror. Not just any bird, but a prehistoric predator that stood taller than most humans and could chase down its prey with astonishing speed. Imagine an ostrich crossed with a velociraptor, but several times larger, a true nightmare for anything that crossed its path. These were the terror birds, and they dominated South America for millions of years. While some giant terror birds relied on sheer size and power, many others evolved a different strategy: speed. Studies of their leg bones reveal a structure remarkably similar to modern ostriches, with short thigh bones and elongated lower leg and foot bones, a clear sign of high-speed running. Paleontologists estimate that some, like Titanus, could reach speeds exceeding 30 km/h. That's faster than Usain Bolt, but with twice the height and several times the weight. But speed wasn't just for hunting. It was also crucial for defense. In a world filled with giant carnivorous mammals and enormous crocodilians, a quick escape could mean the difference between life and death. This combination of speed and size made them versatile predators, adapting to various hunting strategies. Smaller, faster species likely chased down swift prey like small mammals and reptiles, while the larger ones might have ambushed or even taken on larger, more dangerous quarry. Their imposing size and fearsome beaks often steal the spotlight, but the true power of terror birds lay in their highly developed senses. Studies of their skulls and brain cases reveal sensory capabilities far ahead of many contemporaries. While their eyesight might not have been as sharp as modern raptors, it was well developed, providing excellent depth perception. What set them apart was their versatility, adept at seeing in bright daylight and dim conditions, making them effective hunters around the clock. The inner ear structure suggests an acute sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. This would have allowed them to detect the footsteps and movements of potential prey, even hidden by dense vegetation. I picture one standing motionless in a prehistoric forest, head cocked slightly. It might appear to be resting, but every fiber of its being is alert, its sensitive ears picking up the faintest rustle of leaves. In an instant, it could pinpoint the location of unsuspecting prey and launch into action. This combination of visual and auditory prowess made them the complete predatory package. It's no wonder these birds dominated their ecosystems for millions of years. But even the mightiest rulers faced their downfall, and the reign of the terror birds was no exception. For millions of years, they had ruled supreme, developing into a diverse array of species. But somewhere along the line, their luck ran out. Traditionally, their extinction was linked to the Great American Interchange about 2.7 million years ago. The formation of the Isthmus of Panama created a land bridge between North and South America, leading to a significant reshuffling of fauna. The conventional wisdom held that the influx of new predators from North America, including cats, dogs, and bears, outcompeted the terror birds, leading to their extinction. It seemed like a neat and tidy explanation. However, the truth has turned out to be more complex. Recent studies have cast doubt on this simple competition-based extinction model, revealing a more intricate tapestry of factors. One of the primary challenges comes from a closer examination of the fossil record. It turns out that most terror birds, along with many of their South American competitors, had already disappeared long before placental predators arrived in significant numbers. This timing mismatch suggests that something else was at play. Moreover, the success of Titanus in North America serves as a counterpoint to the idea that terror birds couldn't compete with placental mammals. Not only did Titanus successfully expand its range northward during the interchange, but it also managed to coexist with large canids and felines for millions of years. Clearly, at least some terror birds were more than capable of holding their own against mammalian predators. So, if competition alone didn't doom the terror birds, what did? The answer, as is often the case in paleontology, likely involves a complex interplay of factors. Climate change, in particular, may have played a significant role. From the Oligocene to the Pliocene, Earth's climate was on a long-term cooling trend, culminating in a series of ice ages. This global cooling would have had a profound impact on the ecosystems that terror birds called home. As temperatures dropped and habitats changed, the lush forests that many terror bird species relied on would have given way to more open landscapes. I find it sobering to think that if terror birds had managed to hang on for just a few thousand years longer, our understanding of the natural world might be very different today. For years, I believed that terror birds had vanished around 1 million years ago. To think that some smaller species may have lived as recently as 96,000 years ago, it's a mere blip blink of an eye, geologically speaking. There's even a set of fossils from an unidentified terror bird species dated to just 18,000 years ago. If that's confirmed, it would mean they survived almost to the cusp of human arrival in South America around 15,000 years ago. The changing environment of South America, with its shift away from forests and toward more open grasslands, certainly played a role. Some terror birds might have adapted, but the larger, more specialized species likely struggled to find enough prey to sustain their massive bodies. And the influx of new competitors from North America wouldn't have helped, adding preyers to already stressed populations. Despite these challenges, terror birds proved remarkably resilient. This revised timeline raises some intriguing questions in my mind. How close did humans come to encountering these feathered giants? What would such an encounter have been like? Could there be any truth to the legends of giant birds that persist in the folklore of some South American cultures? It's unlikely that humans ever directly interacted with terror birds, but the possibility that our ancestors heard stories of these creatures passed down through generations isn't entirely far-fetched. After all, other megafauna that coexisted with early humans, like woolly mammoths and giant ground sloths, left lasting impressions on human culture and mythology. It reminds me of another apex predator, one that has captured the imagination for decades, the Tyrannosaurus rex. For years, it was seen as the top predator, striking terror into any animal that encountered it. Its reputation endures as perhaps the most frightening being to ever walk the planet. But just how terrifying was the T-Rex, actually? The first known fragment of a T-Rex skeleton was discovered in Montana in 1902 by paleontologist Barnum Brown. Since then, major finds, particularly the virtually complete specimen Sioux, discovered in South Dakota, have offered invaluable information. Through excavation, evaluation, and reconstruction, researchers have pieced together the history of this giant predator and its role as an apex predator during the late Cretaceous period. T-Rex, along with other large theropod dinosaurs like Tarbosaurus and Daspeltosaurus, are classified within the family Tyrannosauridae. Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the last and most widely recognized tyrannosaurid species, represents the top predators of the late Cretaceous era and is a key figure in the evolution of dinosaurs. The T-Rex boasted a muscular body that could extend up to 12 meters, rivaling the size of a typical school bus. Some paleontologists speculate that certain specimens exceeded 13 meters, dwarfing any contemporary terrestrial predator. This imposing giant rose to a height of 6 meters at the hips. Imagine that, an enormously tall creature with powerful legs bearing the weight of its massive frame, its head lifted high as it surveyed its realm. Estimates suggest that a T-Rex could weigh anywhere from 12 to 18 tons. That's like several small cars compressed into the form of one awe-inspiring predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex boasted a sturdy skeletal structure with a distinct vertebral column. Its neck formed a muscular S-shaped curve supporting its massive head. The forelimbs were short with 2 clawed fingers, contrasting the long hind limbs. Throughout its skeleton, many bones were hollowed, reducing weight without sacrificing strength, which was crucial for supporting its bulk. The Tyrannosaurus rex, renowned for its massive size and impressive strength, possessed skulls reaching up to 1.54 meters in length. That's about the size of an adult human. The skulls of Tyrannosaurus rex featured large fenestrae. These openings reduced weight, but also showcased unique adaptations. I'm thinking of the extremely wide rear and then the narrow snout, all ensuring exceptional binocular vision. These skulls were composed of massive yet fused bones with pneumatized components. It's fascinating to think about how these skulls contributed to the tyrannosaurid trend of a powerful bite, one that surpassed that of non-tyrannosaurids. I remember reading that the upper jaw's U-shaped tip allowed for the extraction of more tissue and bone with each bite, though it heightened stress on the front teeth. The teeth in the upper jaw exhibited prominent ridges and tips that curled backward like cutting tools. This is what they call heterodonty. The remaining teeth, robust and spaced, resembled lethal bananas. In mature individuals, the upper jaw housed larger teeth than the lower jaw, with the largest tooth discovered measuring 30.5 centimeters in length. I've seen depictions of these jaws, and it's striking how many small openings were observed in both the upper and lower jaws, suggesting potential sensory functions or maybe even external structures. Despite Tyrannosaurus rex's reputation for its massive jaws and teeth, I can't help but think about its disproportionately small arms. For a long time, the common wisdom was that they were useless, but some speculate that those small arms were not useless remains, but deadly weapons, used in hand-to-hand combat. Paleontologist Stephen Stanley, I recall, proposed that they were used as lethal weapons. Just 3 feet in length, they had crescent-shaped claws sharpened to a razor edge, capable of causing deadly injuries to unsuspecting prey. I picture the moment when the T-Rex advances toward its target, its huge head hanging above, while its strong front limbs make rapid slashing movements, cutting through tissue and muscles with frightening accuracy. This paints a new picture of how the T-Rex hunted, showing its skill in quickly and effectively immobilizing its prey. Once thought to be useless structures, like wisdom teeth in humans or wings in flightless birds, the T-Rex's arms are now recognized as crucial weapons in its hunting tactics, adding to the fear of this prehistoric, dominant predator. The Jurassic Park movies, as entertaining as they are, often portray Tyrannosaurus rex as having poor eyesight. Characters evade its notice by remaining still, but recent scientific findings suggest otherwise. Paleontologists, using comparative anatomy and fossil evidence, theorize that the T-Rex likely had vision like contemporary predators like hawks, with the ability to detect both moving and stationary objects. This challenges its cinematic depiction and deepens our understanding of its sensory capabilities. Another perspective suggests the T-Rex was an adept ambush predator, utilizing its size, powerful jaws, and heightened senses to swiftly hunt prey. Conversely, some view it as a scavenger, feeding on carrion or scavenging from carcasses. These differing views underscore the complexity of the T-Rex's behavior and ecological role, fueling ongoing debates among researchers. Along with its extraordinary eyesight, the Tyrannosaurus rex possessed a remarkable sense of smell, akin to vultures today. This keen olfactory ability allowed it to spot objects up to 6 kilometers away under ideal conditions. In addition to its sharp senses, the T-Rex excelled at hunting due to its quick speed. Able to detect prey from a distance, it could pursue its targets at speeds reaching 25 km/s, a pace comparable to the world record sprinting speed of Usain Bolt. I can almost imagine myself wandering in a primeval environment, trying to navigate back to safety with the noises of the woods echoing in the background. Suddenly, a tremendous noise halts you in your tracks. The Tyrannosaurus Rex is approaching, causing your heart to race. Desperately trying to escape the advancing creature, you sprint frantically, your feet pounding on the forest floor. Yet, you feel the earth tremble under your feet as the T-Rex closes in. Glancing back, you see its massive silhouette with gleaming, sharp teeth under the sun's rays. Realizing to no escape, the T-Rex's jaws close on you with incredible force. 50 to 60 teeth, each as big as a banana, pierce your skin simultaneously, sending waves of agony through your body. In that horrifying moment, you experience the true terror of being hunted by the most formidable predator to ever roam the earth. The feeding and diet of the Tyrannosaurus Rex were integral to its dominance as a top predator. During the late Cretaceous period, with its massive size and powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, T-Rex was a formidable carnivore. Its diet primarily consisted of large herbivorous dinosaurs, such as Triceratops and Ankylosaurus, which were among the toughest dinosaurs of their time. It's also believed that T-Rex may have occasionally targeted individuals of its own kind or even formidable predators, demonstrating the sheer dominance and terror of this apex predator. The Tyrannosaurus Rex had a significant impact on its surroundings beyond its role as an efficient hunter. Its presence necessitated changes in the behavior of other animals. Some dinosaurs developed defenses such as speed or armor to evade its attacks, while others sought refuge in dense forests or migrated to new areas. As the dominant predator, T-Rex reshaped prey distribution and population dynamics, influencing ecological balance and predator-prey relationships. The Tyrannosaurus Rex shared its environment with a diverse array of other dinosaurs, each possessing unique adaptations and behaviors. Among these were Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Torosaurus, Albertosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Dinosaurus, Ornithomimus, and Anzu. The T-Rex's formidable presence. Forget the horned helmets and storm-tossed seas you might imagine when you think of Vikings. The Vikings I've been studying faced something far more terrifying, creatures so colossal and powerful they seemed ripped from legend. These weren't just animals. They were giants of a dying world, beasts that could crush ships and skewer warriors in an instant. Armed with iron blades and wooden shields, the Vikings didn't just conquer lands. They battled nature itself in clashes so intense they became legends whispered for centuries. The first beast our Norse ancestors regularly encountered was the magnificent aurochs, wild cattle unlike anything alive today. Standing at a towering 6 feet at the shoulder, these weren't your typical farm animals. A full-grown aurochs bull could weigh up to 2,200 pounds, with a muscular frame that dwarfed even the largest modern cattle breeds. What made aurochs truly intimidating were their enormous horns, curved weapons that could span over 3 feet from tip to tip. These weren't defensive tools. They were perfectly designed killing instruments. The forward-facing orientation allowed bulls to charge directly at threats with enough force to impale a fully armored warrior or even flip a small boat. Archaeological evidence suggests that aurochs' horns were often kept as trophies after successful hunts, becoming drinking vessels for the most prestigious Viking warriors. The relationship between Vikings and aurochs was more than just survival. It was woven into their very culture, leaving a mark on Norse art, symbolism, and even the warrior mindset. Hunting these beasts was a true test of courage for young Norse warriors. Unlike modern hunting, where distance and firearms provide safety, Viking hunters had to approach within spear-throwing range, close enough to smell the animal's breath. A charging aurochs could reach speeds of 22 miles per hour, leaving hunters with mere seconds to make their throw or face the consequences. I've seen many Norse graves containing evidence of horn wounds, silent testimony to hunts gone wrong. By the Viking Age, aurochs populations were already declining across Europe due to habitat loss and hunting prey. The last known aurochs died in 1627 in Poland's Jaguar-Sized forest, long after the Viking era had ended. But the land wasn't the only domain where Vikings encountered magnificent creatures that have since vanished. The seas that formed their highways held their own vanished giants. If you sailed with Vikings across the northern Atlantic, you would have witnessed an extraordinary sight along rocky coastlines. Colonies of thousands of black and white birds standing upright like tiny sentinels. The great auk, often called the original penguin, bore a striking resemblance to its southern hemisphere counterparts, despite having no direct relation. Standing about 2.5 feet tall, these flightless birds were perfectly adapted to the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Their wings had transformed into powerful flippers that propelled them through the ocean with remarkable speed. Measurements based on similar birds suggest they could fly underwater at up to 22 miles per hour. On land, however, they were awkwardly vulnerable, waddling upright on 2 legs, unable to take flight when danger approached. For Vikings, the great auk represented an almost absurdly convenient resource. Unlike most prey that required chasing, these birds couldn't flee effectively on land. Norse seafarers could simply walk among nesting colonies and select their victims. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands reveals vast quantities of great auk bones in kitchen middens, often showing cut marks consistent with meat removal. The great auk's waterproof feathers were prized for insulation and bedding. Its fat provided lamp oil, and its beaks became decorative items. A Viking burial in Norway even featured a necklace with 5 great auk beaks, hinting at both symbolic and practical value. Ironically, the bird's marine adaptations made it vulnerable, breeding only on a few remote islands, laying a single egg on rocky ground. By the Viking Age, human hunting had already forced some colonies to vanish. The great auk's final extinction didn't occur until 1844, when the last confirmed pair was killed on the island of Elde, off Iceland. A sad epilogue to a relationship that began when the first Norse ships reached their breeding grounds. The birds that had once numbered in the millions, forming colonies so vast they darkened shorelines, vanished because they had no natural defense against human predation. While Vikings ventured across vast oceans, the forests that surrounded their settlements held creatures just as remarkable and far more dangerous. Among these was a distinct forest giant that many researchers now believe represented a specialized hybrid population, the European forest elk, or skogselgur, a creature that combined characteristics of what we now classify as separate moose and elk species. Standing up to 7 feet at the shoulder, with magnificent palmate antlers spanning up to 6 feet across, these forest giants were truly imposing. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals distinctive antler configurations unlike modern European moose populations, suggesting these animals represented a unique genetic lineage that has since disappeared through hunting prey and hybridization with other cervid populations. What made these forest elk particularly remarkable was their coloration and behavior. Unlike modern moose with their uniformly dark coats, the forest elk, a creature of Viking lore, possessed distinctive light patches on its sides and shoulders. These markings weren't mere decoration, they were camouflage, perfect for the dappled light of the ancient forests. Dayon suggests these animals were more aggressive than the moose we know today, especially the bulls during rutting season. They wouldn't just compete for females, they would actively defend their territories. For the Vikings, these massive deer were a lifeline. A single animal could yield over 500 kilograms of meat, enough to sustain a small village for weeks during the brutal northern winters. Their hides were tougher than cattle leather, making them ideal for shields, boats, and warm winter clothing. But perhaps the most prized part of the elk was its enormous antlers. Viking craftsmen transformed them into everything imaginable, from tools and weapons to drinking horns fit for jarls and kings. By the late Viking Age, though, these forest elk populations were already dwindling. Intensive hunting, combined with the relentless clearing of forests for agriculture, fragmented their habitat across Scandinavia. Encounters with these magnificent beasts became increasingly rare, relegated to the remote wilderness in medieval tales, rather than a common sight near human settlements. But these forest giants weren't the only creatures shaping Viking survival. Deep within Scandinavia's icy rivers lurked another unexpected powerhouse, equally valuable and dangerous. While spotting a whale today feels like a rare and wondrous sight, for Viking sailors, such encounters often turned into high-stakes battles. Gray whales were a valuable prize, offering meat, oil, and bone, but hunting them meant rowing dangerously close, where a single thrash of the whale's tail could shatter a longship and send its crew to a cold, watery grave. Unlike most whale species inhabiting northern seas today, the Atlantic gray whale population was driven to complete extinction by the 18th century. During the Viking Age, however, these magnificent marine mammals were abundant, particularly in coastal waters, where their distinctive feeding behavior made them both visible and vulnerable. Atlantic gray whales reached lengths of 14 to 15 meters, comparable to modern gray whales in the Pacific, and weighed up to 36 tons. That's roughly the size of a Viking longship, a comparison that wouldn't have been lost on Norse seafarers. Their mottled gray coloration, often covered with barnacles and whale lice, gave them a distinctive appearance that featured in Norse daeons of sea creatures. What made gray whales unique among the cetaceans Vikings encountered was their feeding strategy. Unlike deep-diving species, gray whales were bottom feeders, plowing the sea floor for small invertebrates and creating massive mud plumes visible from the surface. This habit brought them into shallow coastal waters, precisely where Viking ships operated most frequently. For Norse communities, gray whales represented an extraordinary bounty when successfully hunted. A single whale could yield up to 20 tons of meat and blubber, enough to feed an entire Viking settlement through the harsh northern winter. Archaeological evidence from coastal North settlements shows specialized bone tools designed specifically for processing whale meat alongside huge cooking pits that could only have been used for creatures of this size. The hunting of gray whales wasn't without peril. Unlike passive species, such as the right whale, gray whales were known for their aggressive defense when threatened. They would often charge attacking boats, using their massive flukes to smash wooden vessels to splinters. Norse sagas contain accounts of whaling expeditions ending in disaster when cornered whales fought back, earning them the nickname devil fish among later whalers. What made Atlantic gray whales particularly vulnerable to hunting was their predictable migration patterns and coastal breeding grounds. Each year, they would travel along well-established routes between feeding areas in the north and calving grounds further south. Vikings, with their intimate knowledge of coastal geography, could anticipate these movements and set up ambush points where the whales would be channeled through narrow passages. By the late Viking Age, gray whale populations were already showing signs of depletion in areas of heaviest Norse settlement. The combination of increased whaling efficiency and the species' low reproductive rate, females typically give birth to just one calf every 2 years, set the stage for their eventual disappearance from Atlantic waters. But while Vikings battled colossal whales at sea, their struggles didn't end once they reached dry land. For the forests of Britain were home to predators just as fierce and far less predictable. In the late 8th century, when Viking longships first landed on the shores of Britain and Ireland, they entered territories where another formidable predator had long reigned supreme, the British wolf. These wolves, genetically distinct from their Scandinavian cousins, had dominated the British Isles for thousands of years before Norse settlers arrived to carve out new kingdoms. Standing taller than the Honshu wolf of Japan, but smaller than modern timber wolves, British wolves typically reached heights of 70 to 85 centimeters at the shoulder and weighed between 30 to 45 kilograms. Their thick, often gray-brown coats were adapted to the damp conditions of the British Isles, with distinctive white markings frequently appearing on their chests, a feature noted in several Viking-era daons. When Vikings first raided Lindisfarne in 793 CE, wolves remained common throughout Britain and Ireland, with packs controlling territories from the Scottish Highlands. I've often wondered what it must have been like to walk through the forests of southern England 1,000 years ago. Archaeological digs from early Viking settlements in the Hebrides and Northern Isles have turned up wolf bones bearing cut marks. It seems the newcomers wasted no time in hunting these predators. For Vikings establishing permanent colonies in the British Isles, wolves were both a threat and an opportunity. Their attacks on livestock, especially sheep, so vital to the Norse economy in places like the Orkneys and Hebrides, made them natural enemies. Yet, Viking warriors also respected the wolf's hunting prowess and pack coordination, qualities they themselves valued in battle. This complex relationship shows up in Norse place names still scattered across former Viking territories in Britain. Places like Ulvedale, Wolf Valley in Cumbria, and Wolf Hill in Perthshire mark areas where Norse settlers frequently encountered these predators. Several Viking-era runestones discovered in northern England depict wolf hunts, hinting that these dangerous pursuits held ceremonial significance for warriors establishing their prowess in new lands. British wolves also found their way into Viking folklore. As Norse settlers integrated with local populations, they adopted and transformed Celtic wolf myths into their own traditions. The connection between wolf and warrior strengthened, with berserkers sometimes described as wearing wolf pelts. The fate of British wolves, however, was sealed not by the Vikings themselves, but by their descendants. As Norse settlements transitioned into medieval kingdoms, systematic wolf extermination became policy. The process began during the Viking Age, but accelerated afterward. The last wolves in England were eliminated during the 15th century, with Scotland's final wolves hanging on until the 17th century. Ireland's last wolf was reportedly killed in 1786, ending a predator lineage that had witnessed everything from the first Celtic settlers to the Viking invasions and beyond. Another animal the Vikings encountered seemed like a relic from a more primeval age, the Atlantic and Baltic sturgeons. These armored leviathans lurked beneath the rivers and coastal waters of northern Europe. These living fossils, largely unchanged for over 200 million years, once dominated the waterways of Viking territories, but have since vanished from much of their historical range. The Baltic sturgeon reached truly massive proportions, with females growing up to 10 feet in length and weighing over 660 pounds. Their prehistoric appearance, with bony plates called scutes arranged in 5 rows along their bodies instead of scales, made them unmistakable among European fish species. Most distinctive was their elongated, armor-plated snout, with a vacuum-like mouth underneath, perfectly designed for sucking up mollusks and crustaceans from river and sea floors. Their immense size made a single catch noteworthy enough to feature in regional sagas, with several Norse tales mentioning heroes who wrestled armored river dragons. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals specialized sturgeon spears with detachable heads designed to penetrate the fish's armored exterior, a testament to how important these catches were to Viking fishermen. Beyond their meat, sturgeons offered multiple valuable resources. Their swim bladders were processed into isinglass used for clarifying beer and wine, as well as making a powerful adhesive. Their cartilaginous skeletons, when boiled, produced a gelatin used in Viking medicine for joint ailments. Most prized was sturgeon roe, caviar, which became a delicacy reserved for jarls and kings. By the late Viking Age, sturgeon populations were already in decline in heavily settled areas. Their slow reproduction, with females maturing at 15 to 20 years, made them vulnerable to overfishing. Predictable spawning runs and their habit of basking near the surface made them easy targets. In the medieval period, dams blocked spawning routes, and pollution worsened their plight. By the 18th century, Baltic sturgeon had grown so rare that Scandinavian monarchs claimed them as royal property, a protection that came too late to save them. As Vikings turned their sights inland, the armored giants of the rivers gave way to shaggy titans of the forest. the European bison, and its forest-dwelling cousin, the wisent. Unlike the American bison familiar to us today, these European relatives were specifically adapted to the dense mixed forests that once covered much of northern and eastern Europe. Standing up to 6.2 feet at the shoulder and weighing over 2,000 pounds, the European bison was the heaviest land animal in Europe during the Viking Age. Bulls developed massive shoulder humps covered with shaggy dark brown fur that contrasted with the lighter coat on their lower bodies. Their distinctive curved horns, though shorter than those of the aurochs, were equally dangerous when the animal charged. Unlike grassland bison, these woodland giants could navigate between trees with surprising agility, using their powerful bodies to create paths through the densest undergrowth. These natural trails, maintained over generations of use, became known to Vikings as bison roads, reliable routes through otherwise impenetrable forest that human travelers would follow. For Viking communities pushing into new territories, these massive herbivores represented both opportunity and challenge. A successful bison hunt could provide meat for an entire village for weeks, along with hides thick enough to stop arrows, making them prized material for shields and winter clothing. The distinctive hump contained concentrated fat reserves that produced high-quality oil for lamps and waterproofing. However, hunting these forest behemoths was extraordinarily dangerous. Unlike deer or smaller game, wounded bison would typically imagine the power of a single charge from a European bison, enough to kill multiple hunters. I've read accounts of entire Viking hunting parties wiped out by these enraged bulls. It's a chilling thought. Even at speeds of 40 kilometers per hour, even through dense woodlands, these animals were a force to be reckoned with. By the late Viking Age, though, their populations were already declining. It was a combination of intensive hunting and the clearing of forests for agriculture that pushed these magnificent creatures into smaller and smaller, more isolated pockets. Unlike the aurochs, the European bison narrowly escaped complete extinction. A small population survived in the Białowieża forest between Poland and Belarus. Today, approximately 7,000 descendants live there, the last direct link to the forest giants the Vikings once hunted. It's humbling to realize that the world the Vikings knew was vanishing even as they sailed and settled. The creatures that had defined their landscapes were already fading into memory, pushed to extinction by the same human expansion and climate changes that fueled the Viking Age itself.